and they were very enthusiastic and positive about speaking with us. The main issues that they brought up, and there were a lot of them that I won't go into the detail, but the main issues they brought up were the challenges of making an immediate switch from in-person learning to using the technology. They basically had a weekend to do that. They talked about the needs of their families for technical support. And as you can imagine, that ranged greatly between the more affluent parts of our community and the less affluent parts. They talked about the emotional needs of families, and that particularly in some of the areas that had been more heavily impacted by illness and by death, there were going to be much greater challenges getting families to agree to come back to in-person school. When we were doing this, it was at a state of rapid change, obviously, because by the middle of March, a lot of districts had already partially reopened. So our timing was actually very good because they could tell us about what had been and what they were immediately facing. We asked about support from the state and county. And while they said it was frustrating in that the guidelines kept changing, they all felt that the state and county did the best they could because their information was changing all the time too. So it was good to hear that. There wasn't much grousing at all about that. There was enrollment loss at every district. You've probably read about that in the paper. LA has had huge enrollment loss, but even in our area, there was loss, ranging the smallest amount of loss seems to have been in Redondo Beach. The greatest amount of loss was in Hermosa Beach. Part of the factor of that, I think, is that Hermosa focuses on younger kids, and families across all of the districts were keeping kindergartners out in very large numbers, feeling like, well, what's the point of sending them if it's all going to be online? So enrollment loss is going to be something they're going to have to deal with if families don't come back. Districts reported they will continue to use technology to supplement, but not nearly as much as they were using it. They've all partnered with social service agencies to provide support. And some of the districts, they all gave out food, I think, but Hawthorne was amazing. At the time we spoke to Hawthorne, which was in mid-February, they'd already given out almost 2 million meals to their communities. And superintendents, one thing this is the final point I'll make, is the superintendents had a weekly Zoom meeting among themselves, 12 of them, and they provided a lot of support and shared ideas with each other. And they all emphasized there was no competition at all, that it was all very cooperative and supportive. And that has to be very helpful as they're all trying to figure this out together. So that's a quick summary of what we did in the spring.
That's great. Dale is not here. Huh. Okay. Arnett, do you want to talk about membership? Where did she go?
I forgot to unmute. Hi, everyone. The membership committee, I'm new as the chair this year. I think it was at the last annual meeting or right after that I took the helm of this committee. We've added nearly 40 new members, and several of them have become very active, just immediately delving into different committees that they were interested in being a part of, which has been really wonderful. We had a rather unique new member celebration. It was called Desserts with the League back in October, and we had several new members attend that, which was very good. When new members come on board, they're sent a letter, a welcome letter with a brief overview of the league itself, as well as sheets detailing, I should say, opportunities for involvement with the league, which kind of gets into the various issue committees that we support. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Susan Grebe and for helping out so much, as well as Terry. Terry's made quite a few referrals. And I urge everyone to kind of do what Terry did. I think Terry went down her list of relatives and said, you. But I just urge everyone to do that as well, to see if there are people close to you that are interested in joining the league. We certainly welcome them. That's it.
You've done a great job, and we really appreciate the enthusiasm and energy that you bring to it. That's been great. Harriet is next. Can you unmute yourself? Health and wellness.
Hi, all. So we've been meeting actually since 2018, and we have a dedicated committee of 7 to 9 people that come monthly to work on our issues. And the Health and Wellness Committee is focusing on seniors. After researching the health and wellness of the 6 cities in our league, we decided to focus on Hawthorne and Inglewood, where the greatest needs were. And also we wanted to expand our membership into those areas. So just before COVID, we were attending meetings of the South Bay Cities Council Government's Senior Services Working Group to gather information from what was going on. And we assisted Grace Farwell, the Senior Project Manager of the Council of Governments, to encourage Hawthorne and Inglewood in becoming ARP age-friendly cities. And we were assisting Maxine Toller in applying for an ARP 2020 Community College grant for Inglewood titled Inglewood Senior Village, but then because of COVID and they missed that, she missed the deadline, so that we may be able to continue after COVID. So during COVID, we changed our direction and then attended Zoom meetings for the South Bay Cities Council Government Senior Services Working Group and set up a donation form and advertised in our league's voter for St. Margaret's Center in Lenox to provide support to low-income and homeless families. We helped in getting out voting materials and group contacts for pros and cons Zoom meetings, and we worked with Jean on that. And invited speakers to inform us about mental health of seniors dealing with isolation. And now we're partnering with Westside Pacific Village's WPV Cares, a senior COVID-19 free emergency response program, to expand into Hawthorne and then Inglewood. We're currently recruiting volunteers. The tasks include courier services, social support calls, weekly care packages, and limited transportation. So that's where we are right now. And our next meeting is Tuesday, May 25th from 1 to 2:30, and everyone is welcome to participate. And if you have any contacts of churches or other groups that meet in Hawthorne or Inglewood, please let me know, and we can add you to the list. Thank you.
Okay, Mary, do you want to do mental health now? You have to unmute yourself.
Initially what I did was in order to get this kind of up and running, we kind of looked at it and thought that it might be a good idea for our particular Beach Cities League to take a look at how we can support mental health, especially with the umbrella over it with COVID. There's going to be so many needs, both in schools, families, and seniors, as Harriet pointed out, that are going to be at risk for having various degrees of psychological issues. So first thing I did is call Beach Cities, and then from Beach Cities, we had a tri-league meeting, and Janice Hahn spoke, and part of her conversation with the league was talking about some of the areas she's working into with mental health. And so after that presentation, I got a hold of her office that also directed me to the Department of Mental Health. So Deborah came on board at the point where we were looking at talking to Janice Hahn's office, and her perspective is a little different than mine. Mine's from education. I was a high school counselor. She's taught students to become mental health providers, and she's also been a clinician herself. So kind of we teamed together and kind of figured that the perspective that we were taking is maybe the need for a clearinghouse of information or services. How do you get what you need? And how do you, because sometimes people don't even know the right questions to ask. So we presented that case to Beach Cities, we presented it to the Department of Mental Health, and both told us that they do provide those services. And after speaking to them, we were kind of going, well, so that took the air out of our sail a little bit. And then we were thinking, both of us were surprised at their response. And we were kind of thinking from there that maybe what we needed is to help them provide better communication to the community about what their services are. And so that's something that they are both willing to do. They do provide speakers, and perhaps maybe at a meeting or a meeting where we could invite the entire membership, we could have one come in one time and another come in another time, just to speak about the kinds of services they offer. And then maybe from there, talk about how we can get the word out better into the community as well. So that's where it is right now. And Deborah, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Okay, so that's about it. So we got a little bit stuck in trying to figure out our direction. And but I think after speaking to both DMH and Beach Cities, we're kind of thinking that that would be probably the way to go.
Excellent, great. All right, moving to natural resources. Grace, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. So natural resources is a broad portfolio that includes the traditional things like clean water, air, and soils, and also our human interactions with the environment, with the landscape, such as infrastructure, environmental justice, hazards, natural and man-made hazards, transportation, housing, and agriculture in other parts of the state. I also serve on the state California Water Committee, the Climate Change Task Force, and I'm the energy team leader. Locally, we have a water and infrastructure group which is actually an offshoot of all the people that had such a great time a couple months ago on our water walkabout. So we're going to meet monthly, usually on the second Saturday morning of every month. But this month, this is the second Saturday. So we're going to meet next Saturday, the 15th at 10 o'clock. We're going to pick which local agencies that we want to follow and attend their meetings virtually or in person if we want to, when we start meeting in person again. So just to listen in and find out what's happening in our local area with like the water board, the air quality board, that sort of thing, with the different water agencies that we have. And also with like the transportation safety groups. The League of California has decided that adopted a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that is on par with our voter services importance, and also that that means that environmental justice is going to be a core part of who we are going forward. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I urge you to join our WIG. We're going to WIG out water infrastructure, and that's it. That's my report.
Super. Terry, you're up with homelessness and housing. Unmute yourself, please.
Hello. Let's talk about the newsletter first, because it's really, we've had a lot of changes this last year. Ashley was doing kind of an e-blast monthly, and then when she moved, we had a changeover, and I kind of filled in for a couple months trying to put out a newsletter, and now a new member, Chris Davis, is going to be taking that over. So you'll notice that this month's newsletter has a little bit different format. So we're sorry for all the different formats, but I think we're finally settling in and figuring out how to move forward. And with that, Ann Coons has suggested we get together a communications committee to kind of try to tie things together better. And I think just as Mary Dillon pointed out with mental health, we have a lot of stuff that goes on with League, but it's hard to make sure everyone knows about them so they can join in when they can. So we need to do a better job of that. But I think you're going to be seeing a lot of positive changes as we move through the rest of the summer and into the fall. Housing and homelessness is another committee I chair, and we had started doing some service projects about a year ago. We had worked with Project Needs, and then when the pandemic hit, that really changed what all the groups could do because of the safety factors, as well as how we could participate. So the group itself went on hiatus, and I'm hoping to get that picked back up in the fall when we can meet again or work with other groups again. But I think we really need to decide what we want to do moving forward, because there are lots of opportunities. But at least 2 years ago, when that first started, we wanted to focus on things that were in, one of our cities, a service group. In the meantime, I've been busy this year working on a state task force for homelessness. And we have created an action policy and a toolkit. And on May 24th at 7 p.m., I'll be presenting that. We're going to be doing at state convention a presentation on this. So it's kind of exciting. You're going to be kind of a test for me to see all the information that needs to get out. So we'll kind of do an overview of where homelessness is in the South Bay, and then move on to some of the new opportunities to try different things, because different groups across the state have have different issues with homelessness, and so they activities that they've done that we may be able to do. But I am proud to say that both Grace's forum on housing and the one that we did on homelessness are examples in the toolkit, so that's kind of fun to be able to see. And Grace has done a lot of work with Redondo Beach. Right now, big planning is going on in all of the cities on their housing elements. There's a lot going on with that. There is a housing group that both Grace and I are part of, and we'll be getting a toolkit from housing, as well as kind of information about the regional housing needs assessment, RENA, kind of information about that as well. That's going to be presented at state, but it probably won't be finished fully and on the state website until fall. But I think that will be something that we should definitely look at, because I feel like that is the whole need for housing affects every Californian in so many different ways. Grace.
The 1 hour talk I gave on how housing policy is climate policy last night for Redondo Beach, that's online this morning. So I'll send out the link.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Super. Moving to Facebook. Jen, do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm just kind of following up behind Terry. She had a great idea about kind of all of us linking together with Chris in the newsletter and Facebook. So I think it's exciting because we're all kind of getting on the same page. At Facebook, there's no deadline. I can post anything anytime. And if everyone's still comfortable with the upcoming dates every month, I'll still do that. But I'm open for suggestions and criticism. It's fine. It's, and I'm kind of getting better. I had some technical device troubles, so I'm kind of clearing that up a little bit, so it'll be a little bit more fluid. But other than that, I mean, like I said, I'm up for suggestions, and I try to link and do as much graphic and visual stuff too, just besides just posting, writing. So that's about it. I don't really have much to report, except just it's a work in progress, and I'm just trying to get as much info as I can out there so people can use that as a reference.
And people need to remember that when they have programs and all that they need to get the information to Jen. Roz, you wanted to say something?
I just was going to ask, do I need to join Facebook in order to get that info, or just are you sending out emails with links and I can maybe just do a link?
We're posting it on our calendar too, on our Gmail account, correct?
So I also am sending out the notices from the League of Women Voters Beach Cities, which hopefully you've all been getting. So if you haven't, let me know. Like the notice for this meeting should have come through that Gmail account. Ruth, do you want to talk about Zoom? You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah. well, we're here. Obviously, when the pandemic hit, that created a whole bunch of challenges about how we were going to continue our activities. And so we were able to create a Zoom account for the league. And as you can see, everybody's kind of figured out how to do it. I did give a talk to the board about basic things that you needed to do. And but I think most people have been in enough Zoom meetings for other purposes that everybody's pretty comfortable using it. So, you know, I think once we start meeting in person, we can also continue with Zoom for certain meetings where that's not feasible, or people don't want to travel or whatever. And so I think it's been really, as you can see, by all the activities that people have done, it's been really a godsend.
Yeah, agree with that. Dale, do you want to talk about advocacy?
Yes. Right now, I am honest, and I apologize for my late entrance. I'll explain to you later why. We are looking for interested people across the beach cities to attend the city council meetings. They're doing a lot of activities that are of interest to the residents in the cities. And what this entails is we need you to attend on Zoom at the moment, and probably ongoing since they record them, to attend the city council meetings. We have one observer already in Redondo, but she doesn't want to do it every meeting, and we need someone else to share the duties. We have one observer in Hermosa, and she also would like to share the duties, and we have no one who's committed in Manhattan Beach or El Segundo or Inglewood to watch the meeting and then share anything that's of real interest to the residents. And it's to watch for issues that might coincide with League of Women Voters, and makes a statement also to our elected officials that they're being observed and supported. Both things are important. So in the newsletter, I have a "We need you to become part of the Observer Corps," and has my phone number and email for anybody who would like to become a member.
Excellent. I do think that we're going to try to do a push this year to get more volunteers to do that. If we get enough people, it won't be too much of a strain on any one person, but a real benefit to the community.
Right, the meetings are long, but you can look also at the agenda ahead of time to know what part of the meeting is most important to the community. So you really do have some control over your time, and also the report back to what we're doing.
Okay, Susan, you're up on budget. How have we done this year? You have to unmute yourself, please.
Okay, this is the treasurer's annual report, and so I'm going to recap it in the interest of time. I've sent the whole thing to Yvette. We have collected in dues and donations $12,450 this year. The big surprise was the $600 in voter service. That was about maybe 2 or 3 times more than we usually get. Our expenses are low at so far at $87.27. So we've got $2,500 budgeted for state convention, which is virtual. So that means that we, can fill our 4 delegate spots, and also have money to reimburse people that would like to go. and see what goes on at convention. They love observers. So we have, you will see when we get to the budget, the rest of everything else will be filled in. So, but things are good, and I'm just really thrilled that the pandemic did not dampen the spirits of our leaguers.
And all the work that you've done, Susan, we really truly appreciate it. Okay, so we're almost on schedule. The proposed budget is next. Peggy?
Yes, here I
So
am.
in the kit, we sent to everybody the proposed budget. And Peggy, go for it.
Okay, I'm ready to report. We met as a committee. We were fortunate enough to meet in person. We met at Susan's home, and there were three of us, Deborah and is it Yvette? Yes, Yvette and myself, and we went over the budget, proposed budget for next year, looking at last year's budget and going ahead with next year's budget. Of course, there's next year no state convention, but there will be the national. So we had to take that into effect. Now, I do know that all of you in your kit received the proposed budget. So it was suggested to me that because this budget has been approved by the board, that we would just take any questions that any of you that are reading it now or have just read it when you received the kit have. We'd be happy to answer any questions. When I say we, I'm hoping Susan will answer any particular questions you have. But anyway, I'm open to that right now before we put it up for approval.
I have a question for the proposed budget under voter services. I don't see any dollar figures there.
That's a really good question. This budget will go through June 30th. The general election will be in November, which will be the following year's budget. The primary, there will be a primary in the spring, but generally we don't do a lot of pros and cons or send out pros and cons because more people vote in the general election. They save their big propositions till then. Mm-hmm. So that's why you're seeing nothing there for this fiscal year.
That's what I thought. I said, well, it's not a big election year, but I was just curious. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, hearing none, we will just then leave it to a vote of approval.
So actually, do you want to talk about the scholarship at all?
I think Barbara was going to research that to see how this year we're not giving out a new scholarship. It was such an unusual year and figuring it all out. But Barbara, did you want to talk about the young woman that got the scholarship last year? I think you were going to touch base with her.
Yes, what happened is I did communicate with her. She's had a horrible year. You know, every bad thing that you think could happen happened to her. And in spite of that, she ran a 3.75, what's the word I'm looking for?
Grade point average?
Thank you. Yes, sorry, my brain's gone. Anyway, she's a student at Santa Monica College. She still has classes until June, and she's planning to return to Santa Monica College next year and start looking for a school for the third year. So she's been remarkable. The board recommended that as a possibility, if things turn out that way, that we award her a second scholarship for this coming year. And it seems to me that there's probably nobody more deserving of what, of Gloria. And so if the board approves that, I would like to meet with her at the end of June. She's got classes until June the 24th, and provide her with a scholarship for the second year. She's in very bad financial state. She's got very bad family issues, and she's couldn't be more deserving.
So I actually think that that's something for the board. So, but
That's a summary of what, an answer to Susan of where we've been.
Right.
Where the board needs to make a decision as to whether to continue it.
Okay.
Okay, sounds kind of clear cut, but we'll make it official at our old new board meeting.
So going back to the proposed budget for this coming year, do I have a motion to approve it as drafted?
I so move. That's Barbara.
Is there a
I
second?
second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, could I see a show of hands of everyone who votes to approve? The people that we can't see. June, Marion, okay, we've got Jess, Deborah, Karen. Can you indicate somehow?
Okay with me. I
Okay.
approve June.
All right, Deborah, are you there? Marion, Karen?
Yes, sorry. I was muted.
Approve?
Approve.
Marion, you're muted as well.
Maybe we can just take verbal objections and then hearing none, move on.
Okay. Are there any objections? And please unmute yourself if you want to object. I think those are the only two we don't have. So I think we have the majority we need in any event. Okay. So let's move on to bylaws. And I
just want to thank Peggy and Deborah and Yvette, and they made it painless, just painless, and they were all wonderful.
Well, I should add to that, she served us lunch. So what could be better than that?
Well, and it's so fun to hear that you actually met in person.
We did.
I think that's great.
I have a great big patio.
It's a beautiful garden.
Barbara was in charge of our bylaws, and we did have one amendment that was requested from National, actually. So Barbara, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, I've done that. Now I need to find it. Did you send that out? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
From National, we got requests that all leagues add to their bylaws. It will be Article Roman numeral 2, Purposes and Policies, Section 2. It's on page 8 of the kit. And it says, policies shall be amended to add the following. B, diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. The LWVBC is fully committed to ensure compliance in principle and in practice with the LWVUS's diversity, equity, and inclusion policy.
So do I have a motion to approve this?
Also move.
And
I'll
just
second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, could I see votes in favor of approving the motion?
I approve, June.
Thank you, June. Anne? Let's see, who? Harriet? Jen? Arnett? Renee's got Mary? Barbara? Dale? Deborah?
Yeah.
Okay. Any opposed? I need verbal. Any opposed? Okay, I think we've passed this one too. Moving on to the nominating committee report. Roz, you are up. Roz needs to unmute herself.
Sorry, I don't have much to report. I have the slate to present.
Okay.
For the board of directors for the 2-year term, 2021 to 2023. Deborah Estroff, Jean Hamilton, Harriet Chase, Barbara Arlo, Jennifer Aglioso. Do we take a vote or?
I guess, are there any additional nominations from anyone? Hearing none. I can tell you that I know all of these ladies and I think they're superlative candidates to continue on the board for the next 2 years. So with that, do I have a motion to approve the slate of directors for the 2-year term 2021-2023? It looks like Peggy is there a second? Mary, and then any further discussion? Hearing silence. Can everybody vote in favor?
June says yes.
June, really appreciate that. Okay, are there any votes in opposition? If you could unmute yourself and let me know if you are opposed. Hearing none, congratulations, and we're so excited to have. All right.
Somebody's not muted.
Okay. Review of local positions. So let's go, I guess, in the order that we have them on here. So the first one is education, Jean.
Okay, so Joan, you said do a review. How much do you want? Not much, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, brief.
Okay, so this position was completely reworked in 2019, so it's only 2 years old. The primary changes that we made at that time were an emphasis on the involvement of parents and the community and talking about local needs, meaningful opportunities for participation, Effective integration of technology, which of course that became a much bigger issue this past year. Inclusive programs to address special populations, which that was already in there, but we just added more people to the special populations. An emphasis on mental health and bullying, programs to address that, and equity and fairness and issues of funding, and rolled in the issue of charter schools on that. So those were the major changes that we made 2 years ago. We have not proposed any changes this year.
And there's nothing that you see even after this year that needs to be amended or changed or updated?
Not anything that we understand well enough to make a proposal at this time. No.
Okay.
All of those issues can be covered by this.
Is there any discussion from people? Any thoughts on this one?
Just that the interviews that were conducted are in the newsletter.
Yeah, we talked about the activities of the committee earlier in the meeting.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right. The next local position we have is general plans and land use. And Terry was going to cover these.
Yes, and you guys can read through it. You don't need me to read through it for you, but last year, I believe we talked about looking at this and it didn't happen. So I think there is still a space. When I went back and looked at what the state of California has in its meeting basic human needs, it has a whole long list of housing criteria. And I think it was in 2011 that this was amended to make sure that we have open space, because there was a feeling that we need to preserve our parks and the beaches, and we need to make sure that that stays in there. But I think with all, with needing to add over 3 million homes to accommodate lower income, moderate to lower income families, it's something that maybe we just need to switch emphasis on in the numbers. I don't know. It just feels like we need to look at it with more of a housing lens at this point in time. And I don't know whether anything major will change, but I think the discussion needs to happen so that we can come back. So, and kind of advise that either everything's great or maybe there might be a couple tweaks. So we'll be looking for people who might be interested in being on that committee. It shouldn't take very long.
Grace?
This has come up because quite a few wealthy communities have passed these things like Measure C in Redondo Beach, and something similar. Tustin has an Air Force base that's being decommissioned, and they passed this thing saying it has to become parkland. If it doesn't become parkland, it will have to be before a vote of the community. Encinitas did the same thing for a former naval base. Santa Monica did it for an airport, and Redondo Beach did it for the AES site. And the state has an overarching requirement. I mean, these are not pristine places. So the state has an overarching need for housing. And since these are public, these will become freed up parcels. They will not, they do not have biodiversity worth preserving and a natural environment worth preserving. And that's one reason why that's one reason why we adopted the DEI as one of our 2 overarching principles. Is it's because if we have policies that conflict with one another, we go to the one that is a higher need. And that's why I'm really happy that we adopted a DEI policy, because then when Redondo Beach then goes and says we can't build housing, we set that aside for a park. We can say that yes, we do need more parkland in general, but like the beach areas is already a state park, and so you're not a park poor area. And then we can also say that you think vertical, that when we have to build, because of land costs, we have to build moderate and low income housing taller. And many communities around the world are just saying your rooftop space is public parkland. So
Okay,
It works
we're
that
getting-
way, yeah.
We're sort of getting into the weeds on this one. I
Yeah.
think that what Terry has proposed is in fact that this probably does need some modification. And
Right.
so maybe if any volunteers that are willing to work on this, and how we usually deal with this is create a committee and report at the next annual meeting what the changes are. So
I'll work with Terry.
okay, are there any other people that would like to work on this?
Susan Greeby, will you help us? You're muted, babe.
Okay, I think she nodded her head yes.
Okay.
And so if anybody else thinks about it and would like to volunteer, they can send Terry an email or me.
Yeah.
Okay, now Susan really does need to unmute herself because she's going to talk about city finance.
Yeah, it's pretty, I got a good one, like 1, 2, 3. So I think you can see they're very broad. The provision of city services and programs at the highest possible level under budget constraints, retention of diverse methods of funding, public service for government. I mean, there might be things that you want to add to that, but it's such a broad position that it gives us lobbying ability if there are things that come up regarding the city finances, where we can have a position broad enough that we can read into it and weigh in if we want to. And this was adopted in 1995, and I think I was on the original committee. I remember we interviewed the city finance directors for our beach cities. I think all 6 of them. Do you remember Peggy? Peggy? I think you were there too. So yeah, so anyway, it's pretty simple and straightforward. Any comments? I don't hear any.
Okay, well done, Susan. Dale was going to cover the library. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Yes. There are 8 positions, and almost all of them deal with equal access. Free and equal access to information for people of all ages, stable funding based on a diverse source of revenue, professional staff responsive to serve the service area needs, access to the facilities at least 6 days a week, promotion of lifelong learning for all ages, availability of a variety of formats, including books, audiovisual materials, and online resources, availability of free computers and internet access, and the availability of resources for job searches. I think that all of those are consistent with the needs that are cross over all areas. The problem is that the libraries have been shuttered and they're just reopening, and I'm not certain which services, which libraries are going to be offering, but based on the fact that these needs are consistent, are appropriate for the library, I would assume that all of them will continue. Funding may be one of the issues, but access is certainly high priority for all libraries.
Dale, there are 3 more.
I didn't see them in the kit. Would you please enlighten me?
Yes, the preservation of local and cultural history, the library as a gathering place and community hub to support local interests and programming, there are 4 more. collaboration and outreach among government, education, business, and civic organization, friends of the library, and other library volunteers. And this was updated in May of 2017. And the update was led by a former librarian, Penny
Right,
Martin.
I'm doing this for Penny and I apologize, I did not have those four.
That's not a problem, but Penny was the big force behind this. And as a former librarian, I think we included everything she thought was important.
Right, she was in charge of all of the LA County young adult libraries. So I would agree that anything that she had put forth, we should continue.
Yeah, I was on the committee with Peggy, and who else was on it there? Susan, were you on it? There was one other person. You're muted again, no. I can't remember. Anyway, we met several times and we thought there were going to be really minor changes, but as it turned out, the role of the library has changed substantially over the last several decades. And it was a pretty substantial change, but I think it's still appropriate for when we did that.
Right, and we're talking access and equity to all people in the community and services and supports that support job searches and personal growth. And I would say we should keep all of the ones that exist. But I talked to Penny yesterday and her comment was, we also need to observe and find out once they're reopened, what areas of need that they may have for support.
Yeah, I was excited to get some emails that in fact the libraries are opening to in-person participation again. So it's pretty exciting. We're finally getting there. Any other discussion on the library position?
I have my hand up.
Okay.
There's also a mental health component to libraries, as increasingly the homeless are using libraries because they have nowhere else to go. Do you think that should be included in the library thing?
I guess my thought was that I think it is probably sufficient as written because it includes everybody, and I'm not that needs to be specially identified, but if you want to pursue it further, we could do that.
I'm sorry, I think if you look at number 4, access to library facilities at least 6 days per week, that doesn't seem to be exclusive. It seems to be inclusive. And then number 1, free and equal access to information, and a lot of people use that. I think that when we have all of these positions, they need to be very broad and not very specific, because specific changes every year. And I think these are broad enough to include anybody who chooses to use the library.
I would be in agreement, and I think that's a wraparound service that goes back to your cities to provide the kinds of supports and services. And again, with the libraries having been closed, I think we need to give them a berth of just the positions that exist already.
I guess that's true because number 3, retention of diverse methods of funding, also includes, like, the LA Public Libraries has a one-stop shop, social services, right? The main library has that. But if they have diverse funding to support those services, I think that's fine then.
Right.
Number 10 also is helpful. the library as a gathering place
Right.
and community hub to support local interests and programming. I do think your point is really well taken, Grace. The libraries were and are a home away for homeless, for sure.
I know that the university libraries are looking at that issue as well, because many of their homeless students are using the library as a refuge.
I mean, even at Berkeley in the 80s, I knew students that lived in their cars. They showered at the gym, they stayed at the library, and then they slept in their car.
Yes.
Okay, so there we have on the agenda is option of recommended programs, and the board provided no recommended programs. So then it's adoption of non-recommended programs. And so this is a time where we can discuss what we want to do for next year in the way of new studies or update studies or issues for emphasis and advocacy. So this is sort of an open discussion. We've got one suggestion already that we update the housing policy, and I think that that's a good one. We've got a committee for it. What other areas do people think that we ought to be emphasizing or studying? Oh, come on, guys.
I just wanted to comment about that. We are undertaking a big project on housing for the coming year, and with Terry, and a big project for environment with Grace. And I really think that if we are going to add anything to this, it needs to be one or both of those, because I don't think there's any more that we can do in 1 year.
Well, I think we're also doing mental health.
Yeah.
Well, that gives us 3. That's even, what I'm saying is that I think we should not go over whatever we've already committed ourselves to, because I think that we've made a commitment to 3 large areas that are extremely important. So if we want to adoption of programs, I think it needs to be one of those 3 or all 3, whichever way you want to go, but nothing in addition to that.
And that's a really good point, because Redondo Beach and most cities, first they have to update their general plan. So first they do the housing element, and once that's approved by Sacramento, then they move on to the transportation, or what they call the circulation element. And those are big political fights, and they have a lot of meetings that we need to monitor and record and take action if necessary.
Yvette, you wanted to say something?
You're muted.
You need to unmute, Yvette.
Okay. What I wanted to say is I agree completely that we do not need any additional programs. I think we have plenty to do at the present. However, I think what's important with the programs that we are doing and the suggestions and recommendations is that they get out. There are things we do, just like nobody knows about any of these programs that go on, like we were talking about mental health. People who need it don't know where to get mental health help other than paying for it on their own, and that's why they don't do it, primarily because they can't afford it. So what we need to do is get out the information once we have it. So I think we should add to all of our programs submission of information to the public, or communication of information to the public. And that, I think if we add that to everything, we'd be doing an enormous service.
I think I agree, Yvette. I think there's a tremendous, like I found out with the Department of Mental Health and Beach Cities, there's so much going on. But I think people get kind of in their cocoon, their little world, and they know what they know, but it's the advertising and the communication. So maybe communication and education, which we're doing, that's kind of one of our main goals anyway, to not only educate the community, but and maybe look at various ways to get that out, like with the mental health, maybe going to PTAs, going to schools, because as a high school counselor, a lot of what I found out was news to me, working in Torrance as a counselor. So it's not, and they were surprised that I didn't know about it. So I think that communication, getting out of the bubble and reaching out to community and making sure our membership knows, because while we are all very involved and invested in these issues and things, there are other members that may not know they're members, but they may not really know what's going on. And I think maybe some forums or updates that throughout the year where people can log on and we can have discussions about that, or speakers about that. I think that would be great. And let people know what's going on in the community.
Yep. Dempsey, you're.
Yes, no, I'm so grateful hearing this. And I want to just add to both Mary's and Yvette's comments. Mary, when you were reporting about mental health and senior issues, that I was just about to jump out of my skin. And then you mentioned Beach Cities Health District. And I only say that because I've lived here for 40 years, and it was only about 3 or 4 years ago, because of my relationship with Tom Backley, our former city manager here in Hermosa, now the CEO, that I was, the Beach Cities Health District and all they offer was brought to my attention. And as we've moved along in these years, there's just so many services that are there that no one knows about. And I think it applies to all the other things that you've been saying. So I'm only jumping in just to say, this organization is so impressive. I'm loving this meeting. I'm loving all the information and the knowledge that all of you have. Probably the service you can really provide is increasing communications out of the cocoon, as you've been saying, and use your voices in connecting and getting these links that you've discovered to these. You don't have to reinvent mental health services or seniors. It's there at Beach Cities Health District. Just got to get people to know that it's there. So thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I add my voice to that direction for this organization.
We could really use a volunteer with your media skills.
Yeah, I was afraid if I opened my mouth it would come up, but I need to be, actually what this meeting is telling me is I often have conflicts, so I can't attend as often as I should, but I will try my best to at least be here and then deliver to the folks that I talk to all of these wonderful things that you're bringing again and to my attention and reminding me. So I'll be willing to commit that much at this point.
That would be appreciated. Yeah. Susan.
We used to have a little publication called Facts for Voters, and it had all of the information that we have in our directory. Plus, you could add things like where to go for mental health services, where to go for housing, all of how to, contact our representatives. And we have a communications committee now, and I'm thinking that would be a terrific service and a way to at least reach the population that goes to community centers and to the libraries with this just little leaflet that has all this pertinent information and help that is out there that we're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my contribution.
Yvette?
Yeah, I have to, personal matter that I have to take care of. It will take me about 5 to 10 minutes. So if somebody would just write down whatever I'm missing in the next 5 to 10 minutes and then just email it to me, I think you'll see me back in 5 to 10 minutes. Sorry.
I'll try.
Thank you.
So actually, I was thinking, Harriet, did you want to chime in on anything? I know, I mean, your group is with the mental health and the aging as well. I mean, that's,
Well,
you have a lot going on with your committee, which I'm assuming is going to continue for this year because you're doing so much right now.
well, I was thinking, well, one way is what we could connect with Jennifer, what to get out, what we're working on with the West Side Pacific Village. And I don't know, mental health is part of what we started out when 2018, where we were going to do some kind of a physical type of program in for health and wellness, a well-being type of program, and or to work with in Hawthorne and Inglewood. And then I guess the COVID thing kind of changed our direction. So I don't know where after we finish this project, I think we'll probably get more into the ARP Age Friendly Cities program to see that grow. So in that, I don't know if everybody is aware of what ARP is trying to do. Yeah.
I think we've done it at the board level. Yeah.
Done it enough times so you have a picture. So it's just to help people see that people are healthy in each community, that the city is looking at all the needs of the people as they age and what needs to be implemented. So what did you want to say, Joan?
Nothing.
Well, I was thinking you called on, Harriet, I was thinking when you were talking about disseminating more information to the community on, for instance, mental health, and you had done that with your program. I believe it was back in 2017. I didn't attend it. And you were gonna do some follow-up on that, and you were handed out a lot of literature. So I'm sure as we move forward, we'll be able to figure out. It sounds like part of what we're talking about is more publicity, hiring a PR person. Well, we've got Jennifer doing that, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the timing of you saying that is critical because Kevin Cody just signed on to our website. I don't know if he can hear us yet.
I can. And hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation.
Kevin, I'm back.
Good.
And so just as Ann was saying, we needed more publicity, you popped onto our screen.
Okay, well, we're happy to help in that regard.
So I am sort of apologizing to everyone. Have not taken a break, and we've been for an hour and a half, and I hate.
I'm in no hurry at all, so I've got plenty to do if you guys want a break.
I would suggest a 5-minute break maybe for everybody.
Great.
And then we can go right into Kevin's presentation. Oh, I guess first maybe we have on the agenda.
Hello, this is Deborah.
Deborah, okay.
Maybe this is a good time to take that 5-minute break. Everybody will reconvene at, let's see, 11:37, 11:40. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And I would have waited. Now they're doing a 5-minute break.
until we sit down to eat. So I have to tell you. No. Kelly had Spencer. We're killers, right? Contaminated. Yes. When I got off the phone, I said to Ron, they should have got to check Mary Alice. What, honey?
I'm just curious what you said. I suspect Mary Alice is more than this.
Want me to take that downstairs?
I'm gonna go downstairs myself.
Are you sure?
Yeah, just for a little bit.
All right. I got off this, I'm done.
You're done?
Yeah, the people from those 2 weekly newspapers
Yes.
and came, and I'm sure that they're gonna give more information. But, I'm kind of an overload.
Right.
I know more than I have time to deal with.
Yeah. So what time is it now?
It is 25 up. We have 10 more minutes. Come on,
Okay.
baby. Let's go out. Baby, is Phoebe coming?
Hi, Kevin. I want to thank you for publishing my pieces in the Sandbox this last year.
Okay, I unmuted. Well, thanks for sending them in. Keep them.
Did you watch last night's vote 3-2-1 vote presentation on the Redondo Beach housing element?
No, how'd it go? Last night? Thursday night?
Last night, yeah, from 7:30 till past 9. Matthew Hensley and I talked about the Redondo Beach housing element. It's recorded, and I think it's gonna go. They recorded it on Zoom, and it's going to be posted later today.
Okay, well, that's good. We'll definitely watch it because I asked Rachel to follow up and she's kept having to put the story off, but so maybe it's just as well she did. So a 3-2 vote to do what?
3-2-1 vote is a community organization. They're relatively new in town.
Oh, okay. So did the council take action or?
No, that was not council. That was a 3-2-1. That was a civic group. We had about
okay.
16 people. We had about 16 people listening in on that.
Okay.
Including Bruce Ellis from Torrance came in just to say that all growth is horrible.
Yeah. Well, I think that's got to be the biggest issue since Prop 13 is this R1 zoning, taking it away from the local jurisdictions. That's going to be a war is what I'm trying to say.
It is a war. I was terrified of giving the talk, but the audience was very respectful.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It goes against 50 years of down zoning.
I know.
Have they allowed the ADUs to come into Redondo Beach? People allowed to do that?
Actually, Redondo Beach always allowed ADUs, and we had permitted about an average of 30 a year, even before the statewide law. And the statewide law hasn't changed it much.
Okay.
Hello, Dancy.
What's being built there on the corner of Palos Verdes Boulevard and Pacific Coast Highway or something there? It's where Bristol Farms used to be. Is that a big condo complex going in? Or
Yeah, I think
apartments?
it's mixed use, shops and condos.
Mm.
It's a big piece of property, so.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really hard to meet our RENA obligations if we keep like using the very lowest density possible and we say that we only want townhouses, but townhouses come with stairs, and that's not the kind of housing that our seniors need. And we have a silver tsunami coming.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, Santa Monica League of Women Voters had a big talk about that I listened to the other day. And
Yeah,
they're
they have a monthly series. That's excellent.
Yeah, they want the abundant housing. They want vertical housing, you know, and figuring out how to improve density so that it actually doesn't
It's
have to
good
be
density. It's good density versus bad density,
yeah.
right?
Healthier density. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Good
Yeah.
density versus junk density is what we
Yeah.
always say.
Yeah. Stop the sprawl.
All
Whoa.
right, well, maybe I think we have a quorum back so that we can get started with our keynote speaker. And I apologize for the couple glitches we've had with his name and picture and hope he will forgive us. But we certainly understand the complications of publications better after this. Kevin grew up actually in the Pacific Palisades, so he's another California person. He attended Loyola High School, and it turns out my husband was at Loyola High School a year different, but overlapped 3 years, at Santa Clara University. He moved to Hermosa in 1970, and he was working on what was then an underground newspaper, the Easy Reader. Over the years, it's evolved a weekly, illegally adjudicated community newspaper serving Redondo and Manhattan. He and his wife Beverly have 3 grown children.
Deborah, mute yourself.
Yeah.
Deborah, I don't think she can hear us. Deborah?
Deborah, somebody.
I think these are very cool.
Can you mute her, John?
Oh, I don't think I can. Oh, maybe I can.
They're two.
They don't have arms.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So let's see, Beverly is Easy Reader's bookkeeper. And I just want to say that from my perspective, I look forward every week to getting my reader. That it's how I find, what's happening, the letters to the editor I read all the time, and it's a highlight of my week. So I really appreciate the work that he does, and am very interested in hearing his perspectives on running and publishing in this new world of ours. So with that, Kevin?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I need to thank the league for Barbara Arlo hosting our debates in November for Redondo and Manhattan and 3 or 4 in Palos Verdes, actually. And that worked really well. And there's almost something to be said about having a Zoom debate, because we had about 150 people on most of the debates. And I don't think you would have got 150 people to show up at the Manhattan Library. So I hope going forward, we'll have a live event and the benefits of that, but also make it available on Zoom. I'm going to start with just sort of recapping what I think is going on in the 3 beach cities right now, and at least the most prominent stories. Manhattan Beach, which I always think of as sort of the privileged, wealthy older brother or older sister, is just bogged down in this Bruce's Beach issue, which is I'm sure they didn't see it coming. There's no satisfactory resolution, and it's just sucking all the wind out of the room for discussion on issues that can be dealt with effectively, like homelessness, for example. Hermosa, COVID had this, enormous impact. And Hermosa may be one of the few cities that put a positive spin on it. It's got a very progressive council. And if you don't agree with them, then you're not happy. But they trying forever to get sort of a zero emission condition, which would essentially mean eliminating cars. So the 3 cities put these dining decks out in the parking areas, which right away removes parking and reduces the incentive to drive. And Hermosa took the extra step of putting a bicycle lane, which essentially eliminated Hermosa Manhattan. Hermosa Avenue and Pier had 2 lanes going each way. They were 4-lane streets. Well, now they're 1-lane street and traffic backs up. But I think Hermosa Council is going to try to stick with that bike lane and stick with the dining decks and basically use it to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk and bicycle. And there'll be a split there. There's a very vocal minority that's furious about it. But I think probably the majority of people are going to be okay with it. And it feeds into this electric bike phenomenon that's taking place now, which is interesting in a lot of ways. When the those little scooters, whatever they're called, Densey, what were they called? The ones that are all over the place.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's been curtailed some, but
Limes.
Where, yeah, and
yeah,
you'll go into the details for folks who didn't notice them. I even forget the name of those damn things now.
Okay, well, there are 2 kinds. There's
lime.
Huh?
I own my own.
Yeah.
Well, so we're talking about the little, as Kevin said, they're basically like a skateboard, but motorized, and people were jumping on them and saving them from walking, but then they were leaving them everywhere, and the company promised they'd be picking them up. But Kevin,
Yeah, those were the birds.
The birds.
Some
The birds.
There was 2
Time flies.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, with the birds, I was like everybody else, just kind of annoyed at these people coming into town and dumping their bikes or their birds and stuff. And then I read this article by a guy who said the average trip is 5 miles. To take that trip, the average person gets in a $50,000 or $60,000 vehicle that weighs 4,000 or 5,000 pounds and consumes, I don't know, $1 or $2 worth of gas to get there. Why would you do that if you could get a vehicle that weighed 10 pounds, cost $700, and got you there easier and faster? And so based on that, seeing all these the bikes, I think, are kind of a better happy medium. I think for the average person, especially an adult, they don't think that's safe. Electric bikes, they're probably not terribly safe, but they're safe enough. And there's a bike store owner in Hermosa named Mohammed. He's got the bike shop on Pier Avenue. And I didn't think he'd be too happy with this because he's not an electric bike guy. And I asked him what he thought, and he said, Kevin, I've got an 80-year-old customer who is essentially housebound. And he got an electric bike, and now he drives all over the South Bay. He visits friends in Torrance, he visits friends in Redondo Beach. He could never have done that without the electric bike. So there could be a significant transition from cars to electric bikes among a significant portion of the population. So anyways, that's where I think Hermosa's probably next big battle is going to be. Redondo, who I've always thought of as sort of the 3rd neglected child of the 3 beach cities. It doesn't have the rebel child reputation that the 2nd child Hermosa has, and it doesn't have the wealth that Manhattan has. But I think it's about to step into the spotlight because it has land. Mayor Bill Brand gave his State of the City address on last Thursday. And when he ran for office, I think he got elected in 2010. The prospect of eliminating the AES power plant was 0. And he and his group kept advocating to shut down the plant. It's polluting us, and we need it to be a park. And it just seems so quixotic that it didn't really get much traction, but it got him elected. And then in 2017, he was elected mayor. And by circumstance, the State Water Resources Board issued a ruling in 2017 that you can't cool plants with ocean water anymore. So suddenly AES's presence from being inevitable forever means inevitably it's going to be shut down. Now, Brand's not happy because the original target date was 2020 and they extended it to 2021, and now they're talking about extending it to 2023. I don't really think the extension is a big deal because it's going to take years of planning to decide what to do with the site anyway. But it will come down or be its use change, and maybe they keep the buildings and turn them into low-cost housing or something. I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then in the harbor, there's a similar transformation going on. Like the 2000s, they had this Heart of the City plan, which would have transformed the harbor and the AES power plant into what residents thought to be too much density. There are 400 apartments, which is not a lot of apartments or homes on 50 acres, but it got shot down. And then in 2012, this El Segundo developer called CenterCal presented the city with a proposal for redeveloping the harbor, which, if you've been down there, it's run down. It was built in the early 60s and not much has changed. And their plan councils are generally supportive of development. And Redondo was probably more supportive of development than most councils. And so they signed a deal with this CenterCal, and they started buying up leases. And basically the city took back the leases. The city would sublease the restaurants and well, not the moorings, but the restaurants and the businesses. They took back the leases, bought them back at a pretty hefty price. And then that was in 2017, but it happened to be the same year that Brand got elected mayor. And Brand pulled the plug on the CenterCal deal, which was, he's in court. He's probably been in court for a long time. CenterCal, as far as they're concerned, had a contract, and they're asking for 14 million, which I think is kind of low, but they're probably going to get it. But it got the city out of the CenterCal project. So now the city has no project for the deal. And they're taking sort of a piecemeal approach to it. Like they're going to rebuild what was Polly's Pier, the old fishing pier. And they're going to try to find a small craft launch, which is a problem because the harbor's small and they just don't know where to put it. But one of the things that sunk the CenterCal plan is they came out with this extraordinarily gorgeous model that was probably 30 feet long. I mean, it wasn't life size, but it was like 10-to-1 scale or 100-to-1 scale or something. But it just didn't look at all like Redondo. It was all high-end restaurants, high-end boutiques, a movie theater, high-end hotel. And people looked at it and said, you know, that's really not what we want. And we don't want to be Honolulu downtown. So there's a school of thought among developers that, and that development would have covered from like Cheesecake Factory to Quality Seafood, the whole waterfront. That it's better not to have a single developer. It's better if you're trying to upgrade a downtown like Hermosa or upgrade a waterfront like Redondo, to have 3 or 4 different developers. So there's a mix and you don't get this sort of monotonous, homogeneous, and ultimately boring development. And if one's bad, it can get scraped and it can get replaced by the one that's better. So I think actually Brand, and the other thing that's helping Brand, he had 2 votes on the council. The mayor has no vote. The mayor can veto a 3-to-2 vote, but it can be overridden by a 4-to-1 vote. And otherwise they have no vote at all. And he had 2 votes in support of his sort of, well, I'm going to call it slow growth. And in the election this past March, he got the 3rd vote. He got a guy named Obagi who is sympathetic to what Brand wants to do. So now he really has the votes to do what he wants to do. And now he just needs to decide what he wants to do. I mean, it's a lot easier to oppose a project than come up with a new project and get support for it. So Redondo has the 52 acres on the AES plant. It's got 15 acres of waterfront that's getting ready to develop. And I'm not sure what the acreage is at South Bay Galleria, but it's probably close to 50 acres too. And they do have, you know, a Paris-based developer who's coming in with residential, a hotel, and some retail. So Redondo's going to have these 3 showcases within probably 10 years. I mean, it's got to take some time. The harbor development is going on. I mean, they're starting, and the Galleria, they're supposed to show plans next week, I think. No, in June, mid-June. So that's that. I'm gonna show you some pictures just to totally segue off, if I can make this work, which could be a problem. And please feel free to interrupt, because otherwise I'll get lost. So the state of newspapers. This guy, can you see it? Good. For some reason I can't hear anybody.
We see it.
Okay, Matt Worker is a cartoonist with the Politico. It's a website in DC. He grew up in Palos Verdes. He was our second cartoonist, and in 2012, I think he won the Pulitzer. So he's a very capable editorial cartoonist. And editorial cartooning, I'm sure you remember when you're growing up, there's Paul Conrad and Herb Block and these legendary cartoonists in every newspaper, and newspapers pride themselves on them. And now they're a dying breed. I'm not sure if any newspapers still have a staff editorial cartoonist, and they run them infrequently. So Matt's a kind of the last of a breed. He's probably 55 now or so. And this cartoon, you know, I asked him to send me a print because it's kind of illustrative of the situation of newspapers, which is that we kind of have a shrinking piece of geography to work on. Let me see what else I can do here. Well, that's by, I don't know, like our 10th edition or something. One of the things that happened about the time that there's a group that started Easy Reader. A guy had been at the Herald Examiner and was not happy with it. And he thought, he actually lived in Manhattan, but Hermosa was sort of out of control. So he started the paper here. And about this time, previously newspapers were set on hot lead presses. So the entry expense was enormous. First, you had to have a press. And secondly, you had to have these linotype machines that you poured hot lead into, and the hot lead flowed through some trays. And then you had a linotype operator who was highly skilled, who set all the type. And that changed in the late 60s when photo typesetting came out. There's a company called CompuGraphic that dominated it. And instead of hot lead, we just would build a page like this page right here. We could hand letter it, drop in a cartoon, and then the printer would take a photograph of it. The photograph, he'd take the negative and burn a plate from the negative and mount the plate on the press. And all that pre-press expense of linotype was disappeared. So we were setting our paper on IBM Executive typewriter, you know, which we rented for $10 a month from a certified office in downtown Hermosa. So it made the entry into newspapers easy. And so a lot of newspapers started up. Otherwise, I don't think you would have had the underground newspaper movement. And most of those that I started with, there's a Sacramento News and Review, and there's a Santa Barbara News and Review, and there was the LA Weekly and this San Diego Reader. They all evolved from sort of underground into community papers because of our, what do they call it? The rat and the python. You know, our readership just kept getting older. Let's see what else. This is the staff in its early days. That's me on the right. That's Hal Heiner, who is our cartoonist. This is our editor, Mary Lynn Swenson. So she went to the Post-Intelligencer and became an editor. Oh, wrong way. This is by Bob Stack. He and Matt Worker were basically contemporaries. Bob went to, I think, South High, and Matt went to PV High. And Bob was our art director for a couple of years in the early 80s. And now he lives on Cape Cod in a 2-century-old house that from where he does New Yorker covers. He's done probably 30 or 40 New Yorker magazine covers. He's like one of the preeminent illustrators in the country. And this, I hope you can see it. This is a cover Bob did when Obama was elected. And it won the Time Magazine cover of the year. And it's just basically the Lincoln Memorial with a big O in it. It's a very powerful illustration. And here's kind of, I just have this in there because he's the president or was the president. And one of my dictums is never burn a source. You never know when you're going to need someone back. So, I deal with people all the time, and some of them are really nice and some of them are absolute jerks. And I don't coddle up to them, but I try not to make them hate me. I mean, if they don't like a story I write, I hope it's because they just don't like the story, not because I was being unfair to them. I interviewed Trump, I think in like 202 or 203 when he bought what had been the PV, I forgot what they call it, but anyway, the golf course that fell into the sea. And these two brothers up there, I think their name was Zuckerman, spent millions and millions on this golf course. And right after they finished it, like the 18th hole or the 15th hole just dropped into the sea. And so Trump came in and put a ton of money in. And he was remarkably gracious with me. I mean, I had just called his office and say, and at the time he's a developer. He's not any thought of him becoming a president. And I said, can I interview him? And they said, yeah, sure, he'll be happy to interview. So he does this presentation to the Chamber of Commerce. It's a big breakfast at the club. And afterwards, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm just about ready to give up. And he comes out from some room and says, God, I'm really sorry about making you wait, but and I don't really have time to sit down and talk to you, but why don't you just walk with me? And while I'm giving direction to the landscape crew, just fire away at questions and just don't print anything I say that looks stupid or that I shouldn't have said. And he was terrific. And so I wrote this glowing story about him, at which we reprinted, of course, when he got elected. And then people are all upset and saying, how could you write such a nice story about this guy? And I said, he was nice to me. What can I tell you? Okay, that's it for my show and tell. Oh boy, I forgot how to stop share. There we go. So what's, I hope you can see the value of newspapers. I mean, it's one of those things we take for granted so much that you don't often take time to reflect on it. But the big problem, and it's not just Kevin Cody's problem, and it's not just the LA Times problem, but it's the whole society's problem, is 86% of news is being taken on social media, Facebook primarily, but also Twitter and whatever else is out there. And I don't have anything against the platform. It doesn't matter to me whether a story is printed on newsprint or it's on your tablet or on your phone. I read Easy Reader on the phone probably more than I read it in print. And certainly with the New York Times, I just read it on the phone and it works perfectly fine. The problem is most people, that's 14% of the population. The other 86% is getting 144 character news. And a lot of news doesn't lend itself to 144 characters. The Bruce's Beach thing is really complicated. And I was having to look on Nextdoor yesterday, and there was complaints about a crazy guy walking down the middle of Pacific Coast Highway. And there weren't more than 2 sentences, but there were, 25 or 30 comments, all are get him out of town, get him out of town, get him out of town. What about the homeless? I mean, it's like, that doesn't solve the problem. And you've got an electorate who's got to go to the ballot and vote for a candidate who says, build a wall. He gets a 3-word slogan and it gets him elected to be president of the United States. So this is a big problem. And it's going to be really hard to change. The part of the root of the problem, though it's not even the biggest root of the problem, is the way newspapers have traditionally been financed. I mean, even if you subscribe to the LA Times, you paid $10 a month or $300 a year even. that barely covered the cost of getting the newspaper from the loading dock to your house. It didn't cover the cost of bureaus in Beirut and Japan and Beijing. That was all paid for by advertising money. And newspapers were pretty much the best vehicle. They took a hit when radio came in and they took a hit when television came in, but they just got clobbered when Google came in. And they weren't quick enough, and I'm not sure it would have helped if they were quick enough, but I mean, they did one fundamental error, which is they made their content available. They let Facebook and Google and those people reprint their stuff that the LA Times. I mean, I had friends who worked at the LA Times, who are reporters who do 4 or 5 stories a year, and they're getting 150,000 a year. But they also ended up writing books about 9/11 and covering Alaska, the environment up there. And the newspapers did that because they could afford it. And it became like the LA Times, from its founding up until Otis, the last of the reigning Chandlers, took it over. It was a pretty mediocre newspaper and made a ton of money. And then Otis takes it over, and he's a, Olympic class shot putter and race car driver. He's competitive, and he's got all the money he needs anyway. So he treats the newspaper like it's a racing pony. And he and the Schulbergers and the Post at the Washington Post, well, not the Post, the Grahams, just competed to outdo one another, and the public benefited because we got great newspapers. Then now that most newspapers have fallen out of family control, and there's this one hedge fund called Alden, and they just see newspapers as a hose that's dripping, used to drip $20 bills, now it's dripping dollar bills. Pretty soon it's gonna be dripping dimes. But as long as it's still dripping and they can cut back the expense, they're gonna keep buying them. But the paper's gonna get worse. The Breeze had 23 reporters when I started with Easy Reader. It's got 3 now. And it's no fault of the Breeze particularly. I mean, there's not much they could do about it. They can't afford to pay anymore. But how, I mean, even assuming the hedge funds finally squeeze these newspapers down to nothing and walk away, how news sources are going to get funded is not an easy question. I mean, the logical thing is you put a paywall on your website. And I think people would pay. I mean, they pay for music, they pay for Pandora, and they pay for the other streaming music sites, they pay for movies. And eventually they'll probably pay for newspapers, but the transition's been made difficult because there's 10,000 newspapers. Actually, there's 8,000 newspapers in the country. There were 10,000 about 5 years ago. But we don't get together. So if I put a paywall up now, Beach Reporter doesn't, you'll just go to Beach Reporter. I mean, it's just human nature. And if we colluded and both put one up, I don't know, you go to the Breeze I mean, even I get irritated when I log on to a site and it said, you've read your 6 articles for the month, pay up. We just haven't made the adjustment to where we're willing to pay for news. And we never did pay for it. We never paid for TV news, just paid for by advertising. And as I pointed out earlier, we never paid for the Daily Breeze or the LA Times or the Herald Examiner or the Washington Post either. They were essentially, we were making token payments of $1 or 50 cents. So the long term, I think the paywall is, I mean, you're going to have to start, the advertising model is broken, gone. And I don't think it's coming back. So if you want Kevin Cody or Ryan McDonald or Mark McDermott or any of our reporters to go to city council meetings so you don't have to sit through 5 hours to get 5 minutes worth of news, you're gonna have to start paying us. And someone's gonna have to come up with a way to do that. And if it can be made financially sustainable, then I think it'll be better. You'll have kind of the news at your fingertips, and it's, phones have gotten bigger, tablets are fine, desktops are fine. And in a lot of ways, it's easier to read a paper that way. I will tell you, there's one problem with digital displays. In a newspaper, every newspaper has some sort of organization to it. On the Times that the column 1 left is going to be kind of a deep feature story, and the column right is going to be the news story, and There's gonna be a sports section and the calendar section and the California section, and they're gonna have inside back pages editorial. You can't really do that on digital. You can't kind of scroll through or jump to the sports page if that's what you want to do. Or like we would, run a large, long story and then have sidebars, which are little short stories that go into more depth about an aspect of the story. But you can't really put a sidebar next to the cover story on a digital display. But it's sort of a small problem, but it's kind of aggravating to me because traffic to our website is about 75 to 80% Google searches. Someone searches Bruce's Beach, or they search Redondo waterfront, or they search Bill Brand. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to click on to Easy Reader. And it's pretty much true of all newspapers. We need to work on that. We need to develop an app. Like I click on the New York Times app, so I'm not clicking on Google or Facebook and seeing that the New York Times has a story there and clicking through to it. But most people, that is how they get to their news. So anyway, we need to work on our website quite a bit just to make it attractive enough that eventually we can gain viewership. But the problem is, even Easy Reader, we did 200,000 a month in revenue. Well, if I was getting $100 a year from people, it wouldn't come close to touching what I need to put out a newspaper to support 5 full-time reporters, even without the printing. Now you look at the New York Times and people are choking because they want $400 a year, when in fact they're giving it away for like $100 a year. Well, they were $1 billion a year company. Now they're probably a $500 million a year company. You can't, that $100 that you're paying for a year subscription, that doesn't buy lunch in New York City for one reporter. So until they do spare, like we have, I don't know how many we have, but we would have to have at least 20,000 of the 60,000 or so people in our market area being willing to pay close to $1,000 a year. And that's going to be a tough sell for quite a while. Any questions? Anything?
How do you support yourselves? How does Easy Reader get support?
We were doing okay. We were kind of marginally profitable prior to COVID. When COVID came, I thought, yeah, we're just toast. And my goal was to sustain the name essentially. So when COVID ended, we could come back. And we've been, declining revenue. We got from 4 million to 3 million to 2 million to 1 million, but we've still had enough to distribute 45,000 copies a week. When COVID started, and our chief sources of revenue, our chief source of revenue is a magazine we have in Palos Verdes, which has 0 news content. Its value to the community is questionable, but it's pretty. It's on glossy paper. We do profiles, glowing profiles of the man and woman of the year and entrepreneurs and picture pages of all their social events. And it's extremely popular. It also benefits from the fact that there's almost no competition. The Breeze owns Peninsula News, and they've just sort of let it die in the balloon. So it was essentially supporting Easy Reader. When COVID came, I thought, about 75% of the advertising in Peninsula is real estate. So real estate is going to go down the toilet. And you can't have people sequestered in their home and think they're going to go out and buy houses. So I called the printer and I said, we're suspending publication of Peninsula. And we also had a beach magazine for the 3 beach cities, which didn't do as well as Peninsula, but it also helped support. It did pretty well. And so I suspended that. And like the next month, the salespeople come in with pretty much the same amount of real estate advertising as they had before COVID. So we kept Peninsula going. And I don't know why real estate didn't crash, but it didn't. And I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that it continues to boom. It won't. It goes through their feast and famine cycles. And so sooner or later, we're going to have to find another source of revenue. But for now, it's doing very well. I laid off the whole staff. I cut Easy Reader circulation from 45,000 to 5,000, and we distributed it on newsstands. The staff, to their credit, and also to, should I credit Trump? I don't know. The stipend that was added to the unemployment. You know, a typical person on my staff was getting $200 to $400 a week in unemployment, which they weren't going to be able to live on. But then there was that $600 a week that came in, and that lasted for 3 or 4 months, and that enabled my staff to essentially survive. And most of them have worked for me for 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I said, look, you don't have to work, but if you do work, there'll be a paper when you come back. And if you don't work, there's not gonna be a paper when you come back. It's pretty much that simple. And almost to one, all of them kept working. And so that was last March. Now I have to admit, first the $600 is gone, and nerves are getting a little bit frayed, and they're getting a little bit tired of this. But the unemployment benefits are going to run out in September. So anyway, so that, and to answer your question, how we survived, we cut costs drastically, and then we kept the one product that was generating revenue going, and it's enabled us to kind of stay even. So what happens in September is I have to, double my expenses, going to have to hire back 10 people, and we're going to have a couple of months to make it work. It's going to be a challenge, but it might work. We switched, people keep asking me, if we're still printing, which is really embarrassing. We're doing the 5,000 a week, but once a month we direct mail to 43,000 homes. And that's actually done well. I mean, the one marketing vehicle that has survived the internet is direct mail. And if you notice, your direct mail may not be quite as much as it used to be, but it's held its own pretty well against the internet. And so my thought is, okay, so we just become a direct mail piece. Just put the stories in direct mail, and that's actually worked out. So,
thank you.
Anything else? I can go into like an example of why what we're doing is important. Bill Brand gave the city address, and I had a pretty good idea what he's going to talk about. And then afterwards, he talked about AES, Galleria, and waterfront. And he talked a little bit about homeless, but not too much. But even if I were to write a story based on his speech, he talked for probably 30 minutes. The history of the waterfront's 70 years old. The history of the power plant's 100 years old. And for the reader to really understand the significance of what he's talking about required more in-depth reporting, research. So, but I was able to just scroll through the stories we've done. I mean, I scrolled through when he got elected in 2010, and I scrolled through the 201 Heart of the City stories, and the 212 when they adopted Center Cal, and the 217 when the Water Resources Board. And there's no way I was going to remember all this, but I had that resource. I had these archives to go back to. And even future reporters, that just doesn't exist on social media. If you want to go through and track Trump's proclamations or track the evolution of political support for homeless, you just can't do it. So someone has got to come up with a way where they basically have a contemporaneous history maker, which is, of course, what newspapers like to think of themselves as history in current times.
So how many letters to the editor do you get every week? And how do you decide you're going to publish?
We don't get that many. We get anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen written. On Facebook, on our website, both on our website and our Facebook page, we have a website. You click on the website, you see a story, you want to read it, you click on it. At the end of the story, there's a place for comments. You can type in your comments. And so every week there's a aggregate program that finds all those comments, and I scroll through them and use the ones that are coherent. And then we also, like when I did a story on the AES power plant last week, I put it on our Facebook page, and there's just a paragraph. It says, Mayor Brand spoke about the development of the AES power plant and how he hopes to see it gone in 2023. And then if you clicked on it, it would take you to the full story. But people don't bother to click on it. They think, oh, okay, on to the next story. And, but they'll leave a comment like, that's stupid, or why is he doing that? Or, you know, things that they're not letters to the editor. They don't convey a complete thought. So I can't really use them. But we do really appreciate letters to the editor. And we get enough to where it's, you know, certainly a page we'll always have. You, Mary?
I live in Manhattan Beach, and the Bruce's Beach thing has been, you know, the ongoing discussion for what, maybe more like a year or more. Actually, it goes back way before that. But one of my frustrations has been that the information, or even finding the true information on the history and the number of parcels and exactly where they were and how many other people owned property there and what happened to them. I mean, there's the story of it, of the Bruces, but there's also all these other people that were also separated from the property. And you know, it goes, when I saw that there was an article in the New York Times, I gasped, because it really did misrepresent, I think, to a large degree, what exactly happened. It's frustrating, because every once in a while I'll scroll through Nextdoor. I usually try and stay off of it, because it's just, it's mentally much healthier for me to stay off of it. But that lack of research, and then if you want the research, where do you actually go to find the research?
An easy reader. We have done a dozen in-depth stories on Bruce's Beach.
Okay.
But you're right. People, they try to encapsulate it into a single sentence, and you just can't do it. I mean, the mind, doesn't matter how smart you are, you can't grasp a complicated concept. There's a guy who wrote a book called A is for Ox, and he essentially talks about an post-literate society and when I saw Instagram come out, I thought, oh my God, this is worse than Facebook. I mean, you're not even typing a paragraph. You're just using hieroglyphics. And the, I don't know, this is a famous Walter reporter said, the reason most people can't write is because they can't think. Well, we think in words. If you're not using your words, you're not thinking. You're not going to be able to get from, do we build give that property back or not give it back, without thinking it through. And that's work. So another example I hesitate to dive into, but is the McMartin case. I covered it extensively, and people still say, well, what do you think happened? And I go, God damn, I wrote about that so extensively. He says, well, there must have been something. I said, why do you say that? He says, well, all those charges and all that thing. And I go, there, in the McMartin case, there's, you're all familiar with it, I assume. Okay, there's 7 preschools closed, not just McMartin. And during the early investigation, the chief of police, this guy named Harry Kumar, just this old school gumshoe kind of cop. He's just getting harassed. Why aren't you arresting these people? Why aren't you arresting these people? And he goes, because I can't find any evidence. I haven't found any postman who stumbled in on him. I haven't found any picture. I haven't found anything. And so finally, the parents got to Ira Reiner, who's running for re-election, and say, this our chief of police is not doing his job. He's got to arrest these people. And so the DA, they take the case to the grand jury. The grand jury is traditionally rubber stamp whatever the DA says should be done. And the DA takes over the investigation. And then they file charges. And the prosecutor says, off the record to different people, we don't have any evidence yet, but we'll find it, because it was just such a massive crime. Well, they go to trial, and this was an extraordinary display of the value of our court system. The trial went on, I think, for 2 years. It cost $15 million. The judge was not sympathetic to the defendants, but he was also very true to the law. And they had 3 areas of evidence, and this is it. They found no pictures. They put the postman on, and they put the electrician on, and they put the garbage collector on as witnesses. They had over 100 witnesses. Nobody ever saw any criminal activity. But they had all these, okay, well, let's start with the evidence. The evidence, one, they had a jailhouse confession from Raymond Bucky to a guy named George Freeman. And now, are you familiar at all with jailhouse informants? Okay, I wasn't either. But you'll see it in Orange County. It's like, it's on the front page of the Times about once a year. But essentially, you get thrown in jail for DUI. And there's a guy in this jail cell with you. He said, I got a DUI. I said, that's too bad. Where are you from? He said, Hermosa Beach. Did you hit it? Did you have an accident? No, there wasn't any accident. Well, the next morning, I'm charged with hit and run because this guy has done what's called drop a dime. He's called the DA's office and say, you know what? I'm in a cell with this guy. He came in on a DUI and he drives a Volvo and he was going down Hermosa Avenue when he got stopped and he thinks he hit something. And now I'm facing a charge like that. And the DA and the jails, they have a system. They have known informants. I mean, the informants actually wear a different bracelet as kind of a warning to the other inmates not to talk to them. But people talk. They make this stuff up. Then they put him on the witness stand. And the witness says, yeah, I was in the cell with a guy, Kevin. I've never seen him before, but he told me he hit and ran. And I said, no, that's not true. I never told him that. Well, who are you going to believe? Especially if they dressed up the jailhouse informant. So that was sort of a three-legged stool, the first piece of evidence in the McMartin case. He had to be a very bad jailhouse informant. He fled the day before he was supposed to testify, just disappeared. So he was brought into the courtroom in shackles. And the DA said, you know, can we take him out and clean him up because he'd been out on an all-night drunk or something like that. And the judge said, no, I'm not giving this guy any benefits whatsoever. And the defense attorney says, you have no credibility at all. And he testified. He says, I was in the cell with Raymond Bucky, and Raymond Bucky confessed to molesting all these kids. And the defense just says, do you have any credibility whatsoever? He goes, no. I mean, he acknowledges it. Do you have a murder charge hanging over you? Yeah. Are you afraid if you don't testify for the DA that they're going to charge murder against you? Yeah. So the jury pretty much dismissed that. So that's a third of the evidence. The more powerful evidence is this Dr. Astrid Hager, who is still has a prominent position at USC, and she's a prominent specialist in abused children. And she had introduced this novel concept. She and this other doctor, whose name escapes me right now, called using the colposcopic slides. And they took pictures essentially of the children's vaginal areas and anal areas. And based on those pictures, she examined 400 kids, and I think all of them, she concluded, they'd all gone to McMartin and they'd all been abused. And that sort of defies logic, but she's a very presentable, very attractive, professional looking doctor. And she gets up and she shows the slides. And you may not want to think about this, but the tissue is similar to the inside of your mouth. There's bumps and ridges and stuff. And she would point to an area on the slide and say, that's evidence of blunt force trauma, which is their euphemism for rape. And when the defense cross-examined her, and so you have this doctor testify, there's 7 children defendants and they all have the slides. The doctor says they've all been abused. It's beyond reasonable doubt. End of case. So the defense attorney, this guy, Danny Davis, he walks up to the image that's on this, display and asks the doctor to come off stand and circle the area where that's evidence of scarring, because it all looks the same. To the layperson, it's just blood vessels and skin. And so she circles it, and he does this with all 7 defendants. Then the prosecution calls their second specialist, child examiner specialist, and they show the slides again, and he testifies this is clear evidence of blunt force trauma. And you're thinking, oh man, 2 doctors, they agree. Then the defense attorney gets up and says, can you point out to me where the blunt force trauma is on this, plaintiff number 1, plaintiff number 2, plaintiff number 3. So they circle it, and to nobody's surprise, none of the circles lined up. There was no science behind their assessment of, we're talking about post stress. These kids weren't brought in when they were bleeding. They were brought in a year or two after they allegedly been abused. So it's not to say these shouldn't be doing exams and trying to help these kids. It's simply say the science wasn't there to do what they said they did. Well, the prelim was like an 82 and this trial ends in 90. So for 8 years, parents are led to believe that there is overwhelming, and I remember using the phrase myself, overwhelming physical evidence. And, in the back of your mind, I remember my dad saying to me, 400 kids. I go, well, how are you going to argue with physical evidence? So the physical evidence evaporates, just disintegrates. So then they had the third leg was the children's account of their days at McMartin Preschool. And the prosecution shows these videos and these kids say, Raymond abused me. He did this, he did that, did it in the cellar, he did it in the airplane, he did it in the car wash. And it was all pretty hard to believe, but it was kid after kid and kids confabulate and they may have got confused between the car wash and the preschool and the videos are heart-wrenching. So you're thinking, this is not good. The defense gets up, they said, you know what, can we advance those videos a little bit? Well, they advanced the videos and the doctor, it's not a doctor, actually, this is an unlicensed therapist, Key McFarland, has a kid come in, says, how are you? Fine. How did you like McMartin Preschool? Fine. How long did you go there? I don't know. Did you ever get hurt there? No. Johnny went there. He said he got hurt. Oh, Johnny said you got hurt. Oh, did you get hurt? Yes. And like within 3 questions, they turned the kid around and then they had what are called anatomically correct dolls. And they said, how'd he hurt you? Well, give a kid a doll, it's going to play with the doll. It's going to do something. So when they play the video, they show the kid with a doll showing these horrible things happening to him. Earlier, the kid was throwing the doll up in the air and playing catch with it. So there you have it. Jailhouse informant, no information, no medical evidence. And the videos were so leading, in court, you're not allowed to lead the witness, that the judge at one point said, I don't know if we can even allow these videos to be introduced as evidence because nothing any of these children say at the end of their video can be relied upon based upon the leading process that these doctors and the doctors, in their defense are saying, children are afraid to talk about this. And so you have to lead them. Okay, well, that's therapy, but that doesn't work in a courtroom. And it's fortunate it doesn't work in a courtroom. And I covered another child abuse trial, which was the Manhattan Ranch. And this high school kid, it's just a typical high school football player, gets a job at preschool watching these kids. And that was one of the 7 schools that got shut down because everyone's charging everyone. And he's on trial, but the doctor testifying against him didn't have colposcopic slides. It was just her medical expertise. And I remember listening and saying, God dang, he's in a lot of trouble because this doctor said that all these kids were abused. So if it weren't for the videos and it weren't for the colposcopic slides, which are what everybody made people think that McMartin's guilty, they would have been almost certainly convicted because there's no way to refute 400 kids talking. And the tragedies, the many tragedies is that if you're a parent, are you glad to learn your kids weren't abused and that you've just been an idiot for the past 10 years and you've been raising them as if they were abused? Or are you furious because this guy got away, knowing in the back of your head that there's no evidence that he did anything? So anyway, that's sort of the kind of story that when people like the New York Times, when she did the Bruce's Beach story, she should have gone back into our archives and got the history. And if someone starts writing about McMartin 10 years from now, which they do every 10 years, I hope they go back into the archives and read what we wrote, because I wouldn't even remember this stuff myself, except that I tell the story every time someone comes up to me and says, well, something must have happened. I mean, I ran across a letter from a guy that's not that old, whose kid was there, but not one of the complaining witnesses. And he said, they may not all have been abused, but my kid was. And I go, Jesus. Okay. So that's my long McMartin story. Yes, Ruth.
Yeah, can I say something about McMartin? Because my kids were involved in that. My older daughter went a couple of days afternoon in the morning with her babysitter's child. And she was examined at CII with Key McFarland. And he told us, I have a very stubborn child. She was the only child who refused to admit that anything happened. And it actually traumatized her. She says she's still traumatized to that day. After the interview, she was so upset that they were not believing her when she said that nothing happened. And you know, they bring out the doll and they say, did Raymond ever touch you? Where did he touch you? And she points to her hand. And then they said, did you touch him anyplace else? And she says, I don't know, you know, my nose. You know, it was that kind of thing. And so that's number one. My younger daughter didn't go there, but she went to one of the other schools that was shut down. And so we had both of them examined vaginally, actually at Harvard General, not at CII. And with the younger one, they said, there's evidence that's not inconsistent with abuse. Those are the words they used.
Very good.
And I said, well, is it consistent with anything else? And they said, well, yeah, it could be this or that. You know, if they touched themselves, they did anything. So, you know, they were both very young at the time. And we just said, you know, it's going to put them through more trauma. So, you know, we were not inclined to believe all the stories that were going on, but you know,
Your daughter was exceptional.
It was traumatic, you know. They had to find different schools and they had to do all kinds of things, and there was a lot of problems.
You know, one of my takeaway lesson on this is that, you know, you can look back on and see it was hysteria, but we all are, I mean, the parents in Manhattan, especially the ones who allowed their children to testify, they were the most socially conscious, responsible ones. I mean, they were the ones that, you know, stood up for what they thought was right. The others, you know, said, you know, I'm not getting near this with a 10-foot stick because it's, you know, it's going to tarnish my kid for life. So they were well-educated, wealthy, not easily duped, and yet they were. And if you think about it, it's happening all the time. You know, you got a family that gets in fights over USC and UCLA, or some person's a rabid Raider fan who's probably never been to a game, and they get all heated up about it, and the consequences are inconsequential, so you just don't worry about it. But then something happens like COVID, and there's this sort of mass hysteria belief that the vaccinations are harmful, and suddenly the consequences are very serious. And we need to be constantly reminded to try to get to the facts. And if we can't get to the facts, just don't have an opinion. I mean, I'm not going to doing enough work on COVID vaccinations to decide whether or not they're harmful or not. So I'm going to do what psychologists tell you everybody does, is go with my peer group. And my peer group, I like to think, is, you know, well-educated and sensible, and I'm going to get the shot. But if your peer group is, I'm sure there's one of you is Trumpian, but if you're Trumpian and your peer group doesn't believe in vaccinations, you're not going to do the research. You're just going to go with that. And it's like a dangerous form of hysteria that's really hard to break through. I mean, I certainly could not have, to this day, I can't convince people who think McMartin happened that it didn't happen. I mean, it doesn't matter what I tell them. It's just, they're going with the opinion they formed. And Bruce Beach, I mean, there's a form of mass hysteria going on there.
Exactly.
And some people may disagree with me, but if you dive into it, you can't just deal with the bruises. You have to deal with the whole scope, and the scope would overwhelm society. I mean, it just makes a lot more sense if you want to help people who got cheated somewhere in the past 100 years, set aside a fund and disperse it to everybody, lift the whole society, not just one family, is my personal opinion on that. But you can't make that argument with people. People just scream at you. They had their property taken from them. They should have it given back to them. I go, who's they? And I don't know.
So Kevin, we are past our time.
Oh,
and you have certainly given us all a lot to think about. We appreciate your efforts to keep our community well informed, and actually are, I'm sure, hoping that this post-COVID that we can help maybe in keeping you going.
If I may, to that point, Joan, Kevin, I know it's a drop in the bucket. You already mentioned the huge financial burdens, but there is a site that you can go and you can contribute to, support the newspaper, right?
Yeah. Yeah, on our website, there's I think we call it a subscription, but it's a subscription to a digital issue, which is free anyway, but it does get you a t-shirt.
I have two of the t-shirts, but the point is, whatever you can, and again, it's a drop in the bucket. You can't feel that's going to keep the paper alive, but spread the word. There's an opportunity there to, it won't be around if we don't support it. So
yeah, thank you very much,
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And
Nice to
Kevin,
meet you.
and everybody, thank you. It was a great meeting. I'm going to end it here. Thanks everybody for participating, and we're going to have a great year. So, and thanks for everybody's hard work through the last year. I mean, I think it's been phenomenal. I think just listening to this always energizes me because you guys have all done amazing things. So thanks everybody. And the next program, actually, so Grace's Water Walk is next Wednesday, and the housing is May 24th. So
it's a water and infrastructure group.
Yep.
On Saturday.
Okay.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
And
Happy Mother's Day.
Everybody.
Happy Mother's Day.
Okay, well, Grace, keep
Thanks,
us
Kevin.
informed on your events.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I'll send you the link when it goes
Right.
live, and I'll send you a copy of my slides, my annotated slides.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, everybody.
Thank you,
I'll let
Kevin.
you go.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank
See you,
you.
Nancy.